The man on the shoulder. The first time Daniel saw him, it was in the reflection of a shop window. He was crossing Main Street on a Saturday morning, coffee in hand, when a movement in the glass beside him snagged his attention. He glanced sideways, already annoyed at himself. Ever since the accident, jumpy reflexes had become a habit, but the street behind him was normal. Kids dragging their parents past the toy store, a delivery van double parked, an old man smoking beneath the no smoking sign. No one close enough to be the source of that sudden flicker of motion. But in the tinted glass, just for a heartbeat, he'd seen someone walking half a step behind him. Same height, same walk, same gray jacket. He stopped dead in the middle of the pavement. Someone behind him cursed and bumped around him with a muttered, "Sorry, man." But when Daniel turned fully, there was nothing. Just people in their own bubbles, moving past him like he wasn't there. He stood in front of the shop window and looked properly this time. The reflection stared back, brown hair that needed a cut, faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the scar just under his jaw that he never liked to look at too closely. "You're fine," he told himself. "You're jumpy, that's all." But as he walked on, he picked up his pace, fighting the feeling that if he turned at just the wrong moment, he'd see someone matching his stride exactly, just out of reach. Like a shadow that had slipped off the floor and learned to walk. The accident had happened 11 months earlier, at a crossroads just outside town. He didn't drive that way anymore, but his mind replayed it whether he wanted it to or not. Rain hammering the windshield, wipers smearing water rather than clearing it, headlights blurring into streaks. He'd been coming back from a late shift, exhausted and wired and hungry, the kind of tired where the world starts to feel unreal. He remembered the red light. He remembered thinking, "I can make it, it's empty." He remembered the screech of tires, a white van appearing from nowhere too fast. He remembered the certainty, absolute and cold, that this was it. Then he remembered nothing. He'd woken up sitting in his car on the other side of the intersection, engine still idling, both hands welded to the steering wheel. The van was already a blur of taillights in his rearview mirror, never even slowing down. He'd gotten out, checked the car, checked himself. No dents, no broken glass, no blood. If it wasn't for the memory of bone-deep terror pouring through him like ice water, he could have believed nothing had really happened. The paramedic at the clinic had said it was probably shock and a near miss. The doctor had asked if he wanted something for the anxiety when he admitted he was having trouble sleeping since. He'd said no. But after that night, he never drove that route again. And every now and then, especially when he was tired, he'd get a sensation at the edge of his awareness that he had not walked away alone. That something else had stepped out of that moment with him. It escalated slowly. A shape in his peripheral vision in the corridor at home, a figure standing at the end of the supermarket aisle that vanished when he looked straight at it, the sense of someone behind him on the stairs when he knew he was alone. The human brain is good at ignoring patterns until they get too obvious to ignore. The pattern here was simple. Every time the glimpse was of someone his size, his build, a jacket the same color as his. Sometimes he could have sworn he recognized the tilt of the head, the way the shoulders slouched. 3 months after the window incident, he started avoiding reflective surfaces when he was alone. It felt ridiculous, childish even, but there was something about catching himself half a second out of sync that knotted his stomach. And always in the back of his mind, that crossroads, the screech that didn't quite happen, the crunch of metal that never came. "You should have died," some quiet part of him said on bad nights. Something was supposed to end there. The call from his mother came on an overcast Thursday afternoon. He was on the couch, laptop balanced on his knees, pretending to focus on a spreadsheet while his mind wandered. The phone buzzed on the coffee table, and he glanced at the screen. "Mom." He answered, "Hey." Her voice was tight. "Daniel, where are you?" "At home, why?" There was a pause. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not." He sat up straighter, the laptop sliding to the side. "I'm literally on my couch. Why?" "I just drove past you," she said. The words were so absurd he almost laughed. "What?" "On the R21 near the old crossroads. You were walking on the shoulder. You had that gray jacket on, the one you always wear, and your backpack. I even hooted. I saw your face." His mouth went dry. "Mom, I'm at home." I turned around, she went on, as if she hadn't heard him. "I took the next turnoff in Cam. You back, but you'd already gone further up. I slowed down and called you, and now you're telling me." "Mom," he put the call on speaker and flipped the camera, pointing it at his chest, then his living room. "Look, I'm home. I haven't left today." She went quiet. On the screen, he watched her face, small in the top corner bubble, tighten in confusion. Her eyes darted across whatever lay beyond her dashboard. "That's not funny, Daniel." "I'm not joking." Hesitation, "I'm pulling over." The line rustled. He heard an indicator clicking, tires on gravel, his mother's breathing a bit too fast. She put him on video, and a moment later he could see the inside of her car, the gray sky beyond the windshield, the familiar shape of the intersection some distance ahead, the intersection. "Where exactly did you see me?" he asked. "Back there," she pointed the phone sideways, and he caught a jittery glimpse of the roadside. "You were walking that way, toward town. I swear to you, Daniel, I saw you." His scalp tingled. Could it have been someone who just looked like me? He tried. Lots of guys wear gray jackets. It sounded weak even as he said it. His mother cut him off. "No," she said, there was steel in her voice now. "I know my own son's face." He swallowed. Okay, just go home, all right. Maybe it was some weird trick of the light, or... "Daniel," this time her voice was small. "When I turned around, you didn't look at my car. It was like you didn't hear me. You just kept walking like I wasn't there." A silence stretched between them, filled with the soft hiss of passing cars. Then she said, "You're really home." "Yeah." A long exhale. "All right, I'll talk to you later." "Call me when you get home." "Yes," she said, "and Daniel." "Yeah." "Lock your doors." The line went dead. He sat there with the phone in his hand for a full minute, listening to the distant hum of his fridge and the tick of the wall clock. It was 16:17. On the TV, some talk show host moved their hands, silent. He realized the volume was still muted from earlier. He stood up, checked the front door, and turned the deadbolt, then the back door. Then, feeling faintly ridiculous, he checked the windows. Every now and then, as he moved through the house, he glanced out, half expecting to see a figure walking down his quiet suburban street. Same jacket, same shoulders, not looking at him. No one was there. That night, sleep didn't come easily. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. The usual little noises, pipes, a car 2 streets away, a distant siren, now sounded like someone testing floorboards, checking locks, breathing under the door. Just before midnight, he gave up and went to the kitchen for water. The motion sensor light over the back door blinked on as he passed. He froze. The light came on when it detected movement in the yard. Cat, he told himself. Neighbor's dog, a branch, but the back door had a small square of glass, and his eyes were already drawn there helplessly. Through the glass, haloed by the harsh white of the security light, stood a man facing the house. He was just far enough away that details blurred, just close enough that Daniel knew without the slightest doubt that he was looking at his own outline. The same jacket, the same stance, hands in pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. The man wasn't moving, not trying the handle, not peering in. Just standing there as if waiting for something. Daniel didn't breathe. The glass reflected his own wide eyes faintly over the figure outside, doubling them. For a bizarre second, it looked like 2 Daniels were staring at each other through a thin, fragile skin of glass. Then the light clicked off. Darkness swallowed the yard. He stood rooted for 5 slow heartbeats, heart pounding in his throat. The urge to flip the outside light back on was almost unbearable, but at the same time he was terrified of what he'd see. Finally, with fingers that didn't quite feel like they belonged to him, he backed away from the door. In the morning, he told himself he'd imagined it, that his brain had slapped his own shape into whatever shadow had been there. But that didn't explain the CCTV. 2 years ago, he'd installed a cheap security system, a camera above the front door, one at the back, one in the hallway, mostly for insurance. The postman, the odd courier, a neighbor's teen sneaking a cigarette, that kind of thing. He rarely looked at the footage, but the next day, after pacing the house for an hour pretending everything was normal, he opened the app on his phone. The timeline showed a motion event at 23:56, back door. His thumb hovered over the icon, then he tapped. The video opened on a grainy view of the back stoop, the patch of overgrown grass, the fence beyond. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a figure walked into frame from the right. Daniel's guts turned cold. The man stopped in the center of the yard and turned toward the house. The camera quality was not good enough for crisp detail, but the bulk, the height, the jacket, it was like watching footage of himself. Late at night, going out to check something, same relaxed slump of the shoulders. He watched the man stand there, unmoving, for 15 seconds. Then his head tilted very slightly, as if listening. As if he knew he was being watched. The motion light came on, oversaturating the image. The white glare turned the man into a ghostly silhouette. Then abruptly the signal glitched, just for a frame or two. A burst of pixelation, a smear of gray across the image. When it stabilized, the yard was empty. The timer ticked on to 30 seconds, then ended. Daniel replayed the clip 3 times, each time the same. The man appears, stands, tilts his head, light flares, glitch, gone. He checked the log for other motion events that night. There were none. Carefully forcing his hands to be steady, he set the phone down. He was still sitting there at the kitchen table when his phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from the security app. New motion detected, hallway. He jerked his head up, heart thudding. The hallway camera was inside the house. He tapped the alert, pulled up the live view. The app stuttered, little dots spinning, then the feed came through. The image was of the narrow hall outside his bedroom. The light was off, but the camera's low-light mode turned everything into a washed-out greenish monochrome. Nothing moved. He stared for a solid minute, breath held, until his lungs burned. The phone buzzed again. New motion detected, front door. His stomach dropped, he switched cams. The front door view showed the small porch, the street beyond, his car, empty. He switched back to the hallway. For half a heartbeat he saw himself, standing perfectly still just at the edge of the frame, facing the camera. Then the screen flickered. When it stabilized, the hallway was empty. He stared at his phone, then slowly turned his head to look at the real hallway entrance from the kitchen. "I'm not crazy," he said aloud just to hear a voice. He didn't fully believe himself. He started keeping a notebook. It was a stupid, old-fashioned thing, a cheap spiral-bound pad with the logo of some company he'd once worked with. On the first page, in shaky handwriting, he wrote, "Crossroads NEAR Miss." Something didn't finish there. Under that, he started making notes. Glimpses. Window, Main Street, thought I saw someone walking behind me. Same jacket, no one there. Kitchen doorway, 2 weeks later, figure at edge of vision, vanishes when I look. Supermarket aisle, end of, like someone ducked around the corner. He wrote down the call from his mother in detail, the exact time, the exact words as best he could remember them. The way her voice had shaken, the way she'd said, "You just kept walking." He wrote about the man in the yard, about the hallway. After a while, the notebook stopped making him feel organized and started making him feel watched. The act of writing it all down turned the flickers and half-thoughts into something concrete, into data, evidence. Patterns emerged. The sightings clustered around certain dates, the monthly mark from the accident, times when he'd driven too close to the old route and turned away at the last minute, days when he was exhausted. The word he resisted writing for weeks was the one that sat thudding in his head like a heartbeat anyway. Doppelganger. As a kid, he'd read about them, the double that appears as a warning, the copy that walks where you're not. In some versions, seeing your double meant you were doomed. In others, the double was the real one and you were the mistake. No one agreed on the rules. But every story had one thing in common. There weren't supposed to be two of you for long. Something always had to give. He started avoiding people. Not because he didn't want company, but because he was terrified someone would say, "Didn't I just see you over there?" Or, "Hey, didn't we talk earlier?" when he hadn't. It happened anyway. At the corner shop, the cashier, a young guy with tattooed knuckles, said, "Back again. You just bought smokes like 10 minutes ago." Daniel froze. "No, I didn't." The guy frowned. "You sure? Same jacket, same." "Yeah, no, that was you, brew." "I don't smoke," Daniel said, hearing how thin his own voice sounded. The cashier shrugged, already bored. "Okay, maybe I'm tripping." He left without buying anything. At work, he'd gone back to the office part-time to try and rebuild routine. His colleague Mara mentioned bumping into him in the lobby that morning. "You were in a mood," she said, "didn't even say hi." "I came in through the parking garage," he said. She tilted her head. "You sure?" "Yeah." She laughed it off. "Guess there's more than one of you, poor world." He laughed along because what else could he do? But that night he wrote it in the notebook in big block letters and underlined it twice. The world was starting to treat his double like the original, and him like the glitch. The breakthrough or the breakdown, depending on how you looked at it, came exactly 1 year after the accident. He hadn't meant to be anywhere near the crossroads. He'd been on autopilot, mind drifting, and suddenly there it was ahead, the familiar cluster of road signs, the faint skid marks ghosting the tarmac. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. He could have turned off, but some stubborn part of him pressed the brake instead, letting the car roll to a stop at the red. Wipers knocked back and forth lazily. It had started raining while he drove, light at first, now thickening. He checked the intersecting road. A truck thundered past, spraying water. A white van followed a moment later, slower this time. His pulse picked up. He shouldn't be here. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. For a second he thought it would be his mother again, saying she'd just seen him walking on the shoulder. Instead, the notification banner read, "New motion detected, home hallway." His stomach clenched. He shouldn't be here and he shouldn't check, but the light was still red. The world had compressed to the circle of his headlights and the dull, hypnotic sweep of the wipers. He picked up the phone and tapped the alerts. The feed opened on the dim, grain-tinged view of his hallway at home. At the edge of the frame, someone was standing. Same build, same jacket, back to the camera this time. For a moment, Daniel felt dizzy, as if something in his skull had slipped out of place. He glanced at the rearview mirror, expecting to see his own eyes looking back at him from the back seat. The person in the hallway lifted a hand. The motion was wrong, not unfamiliar, no, but slightly delayed, like someone imitating him from imperfect memory. The hand hovered near the door handle of his bedroom. Daniel stared. The light turned green. He didn't move. On the screen, the figure's head turned slowly toward the camera. The face should have been visible now, but some quirk of the low resolution smudged it into a blur, like a thumbprint dragged across wet paint. He saw a suggestion of eyes, dark pits, the hint of a mouth. The figure tilted its head, the way it had in the yard, listening. Then it stepped out of frame. He fumbled with the app, switching to the living room camera. Empty, kitchen, empty. Back to the hallway feed. The camera now faced the front door. The figure stood there, not having crossed the intervening space, just there, inches from the door, as if it had been there the whole time and the footage had simply decided to acknowledge it. The front door in the video had 2 locks. So did the real one back at his house. In the live feed, the top lock turned. A soft click. The sound it made on the video was lost under the hum of traffic and the patter of rain on his car roof, but he heard it anyway in his bones. The red light slipped back to green again. A car behind him hooted, sharp and impatient. He lowered the phone, heart hammering, and without really deciding to, took his foot off the brake. He drove through the intersection carefully, almost dazed, half expecting a van to materialize and end it cleanly this time. Nothing happened. The crossroads slid past in his rear-view mirror. The rain blurred it into a memory. His phone buzzed again. New motion detected, front door outside. He shouldn't look. He did. The front door camera now showed the porch. The angle was slightly offset, capturing the door itself and a slice of the street. The door opened. From the inside, a man stepped out. Seeing himself walk out of his own house in real time from the first-person perspective of a cheap security cam broke something in Daniel's understanding of cause and effect. He nearly swerved. On the tiny screen, the other him paused as if adjusting to the light. He turned his head, scanning the quiet street, then looked directly into the camera. For the first time, the resolution didn't smear. Daniel saw his own face. Not a perfect mirror, there were differences, small but devastating. The scar under the jaw was slightly longer, the eyes were flatter. The expression was not one he recognized ever having worn, not exactly. It was like looking at a version of himself from a world that had taken a slightly different roll of the dice. The other Daniel smiled. It was not friendly. It was not overtly threatening. It was simply wrong. Then the feed froze. Connection lost. He didn't remember much of the drive home, only that he obeyed every traffic rule like a man assembling a ritual. Full stops at every sign, 5 clicks of the indicator before each turn, eyes flicking from mirror to road to dashboard like a desperate metronome. The rain had eased by the time he pulled into his driveway. His house stood there utterly ordinary, curtains drawn, lights off. He sat in the car with the engine idling, staring at the front door. If he went in and everything was normal, he could write everything off as some catastrophic nervous breakdown. He could see a doctor, get tests, pills, help. If he went in and it wasn't normal. His phone vibration made him jump. He looked down. A message from his mother. Are you home? He stared at the text for a long time, then typed back, yes, just pulled in. 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. Finally, okay, I think I saw you again just now, but you didn't answer when I called out. Call me later. His throat felt tight. He typed I will but didn't hit send, and after a moment locked the phone instead. He got out of the car. The air smelled of wet earth and asphalt. His shoes made small dark prints on the path to the porch. The front door looked exactly as it always did, 2 locks, a faint scuff where his keys had missed once. He fished in his pocket for the keys. They weren't there. He checked his other pocket, empty. A cold thought slid into his mind, as fragile and lethal as a shard of glass. You left with your keys this morning. No, I didn't. Did you check? Had he picked them up without thinking? Had he walked out of the house earlier, leaving the cameras to catch one version of him while the rest of him drifted somewhere else? He reached out and tried the handle. The door opened. He stood there, one hand on the knob, heart banging so hard he felt it in his teeth. The lights were off, but the hallway was visible, lit faintly by the streetlight leaking in through the small window. The same cheap shoe rack, the same framed photo of his parents on the wall. His own shoes were lined up neatly on the mat. All of them. Hello, he called, hating the tremor in his voice. The house did not answer. He stepped inside. The air smelled like himself, laundry detergent, old coffee, the faint lingering scent of his cologne from that morning, or from some morning. He flipped the hallway light on. It flickered to life cheerfully. No one there. He checked the living room, the kitchen, the bathroom, all empty, no signs of disturbance. The back door was locked. The security app reconnected grudgingly, showing all cameras online, no new motion events. The only proof that anything had happened was the video he'd watched at the intersection. He opened it again. The clip refused to load. Error, the app said, file not found. He nearly laughed, of course. He closed his eyes, pressing his fingers into them until colors flared. Maybe this is good, he thought wildly. Maybe it's stress and hallucination and corrupted files and you can get help, and one day you'll tell this story and it'll sound like something that happened to someone else. He opened his eyes. In the reflection of the blank TV screen, someone stood in the hallway behind him. The figure was in soft focus, the way reflections often are, but there was no mistaking the outline. Same height, same shoulders, same way of standing slightly off-center, weight on one foot. The only difference was the stillness. Daniel did not move. Slowly keeping his gaze on the screen, he said, "When did you start at the crossroads?" The figure in the reflection didn't answer. "You were supposed to be me, weren't you?" he went on, hearing his own voice tilt somewhere strange. "I was supposed to die there, you were supposed to take my place, or I was supposed to take yours." The silence thickened. He watched the reflection. His own shoulders lifted with his breath, the figure's did not. "I've been walking around for a year," he said. "Borrowed time, maybe borrowed identity." He smiled tightly at the screen. "Is that it? You want your life back?" In the reflection, the other Daniel tilted his head. Then very slowly, he raised a hand. Daniel felt it a second later, his own hand lifting like a badly timed echo, palm open. The figure's mouth moved. The reflection had no audio, obviously, but he knew what the shape of those words would be, even before his own lips formed them half a second later. "You're the one who doesn't belong." His heart lurched. He spun around. The hallway was empty. He stood there for a long time, chest heaving, waiting for something. A hand on his shoulder, a voice behind his ear, a second heartbeat over his own. Nothing came. Finally, he went to the kitchen, opened the notebook, and wrote. 1 year later. He walks where I'm not, people see him instead, cameras see him instead. If something got made that night, maybe there isn't room for both of us. Maybe I survived a life that wasn't mine. His hand hovered over the page. Then he added in smaller letters. If I disappear, will anyone notice it's me that's gone? He closed the notebook and set it neatly on the table. In the living room, the TV screen, still dark, reflected the doorway. For a split second, just long enough for the mind to doubt itself forever, another man stepped into frame, bent over the table, and carefully picked up the notebook. Somewhere at a rainy crossroads just outside town, a car rolled through a green light with nobody at the wheel. At least that's one version. In another, there was never an accident at all, just a man who couldn't shake the feeling that the life he'd ended up in belonged to someone else. If you scroll through enough security footage, you might catch him. Once, walking past the edge of the frame in a jacket a lot like your own, not looking at the camera, not answering when someone calls his name. And if you ever wake up certain that your reflection is half a heartbeat out of sync, you can tell yourself it's just stress, just tiredness, just your imagination. It probably is. Probably.